Welcome to In Her Voice, a podcast created for women who listen to and live by their deepest wisdom, their inner voice. This was made for you, the woman who feels pulled to more, to lead, to create, to dream, and to be a world changer. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am an inner voice coach. Join me here each week as we explore what it means to reach for your inspired potential, all while honoring your worthiness each and every day. Hello, you guys, and Happy New Year. This is Kelly Covert, and you are listening to In Her Voice. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is the first episode of 2019, and I am super excited to bring my good friend Heather Dominick here to talk with us about highly sensitive entrepreneurs. And I am raising my hand because I am for sure one of those. And I had this wonderful opportunity to talk with Heather and to sit under her wisdom about what it's like to be a highly sensitive entrepreneur and how we can help ourselves, how we don't have to do everything the way we think we quote unquote should be doing it. And this was a huge lesson for me and continues to be something that I learn over and over and over again. And so it's always good to sit with someone like Heather to have a reminder of that. And I want to let you guys know that if you really enjoy this conversation and are listening to this in January of 2019, I want you to take the opportunity to sign up for Heather's free live teleseminar. It's coming up on January 9th, and it is going to be a fantastic opportunity to dig in even deeper to this concept with her and to learn about her business course in miracles, which I think is life-changing. And so if you want to sign up for this teleseminar, it's free. And you can do so at the link in my show notes, which is kellycovert.com/140. And you know what? Also, right in the show notes of whatever podcast app you're listening to, there will be a live link that can take you right there to sign up for it. So take a listen to the interview today. And then if you feel really moved and you feel like your inner voice is asking you to do that, go ahead and do it. You will not regret it. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Heather. Heather Dominick is a woman who is impressively successful and highly spiritual. Heather is the winner of the 2015 Best of Manhattan Coaching Award and creator of the 2014 Stevie Award-winning virtual event, A Course in Business Miracles, 21-Day Discovery Series. She has appeared on Lifetime television and has been published in numerous books. An exceptional facilitator and teacher, Heather is known for creating a safe, sacred community for true transformation. She has helped thousands of highly sensitive entrepreneurs release lifelong limiting beliefs, overcome fears, and learn how to build their business in a way that actually feels so good that they can't help but create solid, sustainable, high-level financial success. Heather is also the founder and leader of the Highly Sensitive Entrepreneur Movement. You guys are going to love this interview. I got so much out of it. You know what it was is I found freedom in what Heather and I talked about. So I hope that you enjoy this as much as I did. Let's get right to it. Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for joining me on In Her Voice.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I am so happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, I am super excited about this interview. And before we got on the line today, I was looking through your website and just diving into this idea of being a highly sensitive entrepreneur. And I thought that that would be a wonderful place for us to start since our conversation is going to center around that. What does it mean to be a highly sensitive person?
Yes. Well, I think that's a beautiful place to start. And the best answer to that is that first and foremost, the phrase highly sensitive comes from Dr. Elaine Aron, who is a psychologist and researcher, and research that she began in the early 90s. And through her research, she discovered that there are 20% of us who are born into the world, what she has coined as highly sensitive. And what that basically means is that our nervous system is wired differently than someone who is not highly sensitive. And that wiring has us interpreting stimulation, including information, at a much higher degree than, again, someone who is not highly sensitive. So that could be in regards to sight, as in anything that has to do with colors, bright lights, noises, any type of smells, but also just input of information. And when we don't realize that, one, we are highly sensitive, or two, haven't really been taught how to use our highly sensitive traits, that can really work against us, and especially if you are a person who has been called to be self-employed.
Yeah. Oh, this is also fascinating to me because I think a lot of times, and probably those of us who are highly sensitive have heard this in our life, don't be so sensitive. You're just too sensitive. And it seems as though it's a fault. But what I hear you saying is that it doesn't have to be.
Absolutely not. So, first of all, that example that you just gave absolutely is so common for those of us who are highly sensitive. And the work that I've done is my research and the teachings and tools and trainings that I've developed build upon Dr. Elaine Aron's work. And as part of that, I've identified what I refer to as 12 top HSE shadows and 12 top HSE strengths. So, when you learn how to shift your relationship with your highly sensitive nature from the shadow side to the strength side, oh my gosh. First of all, so much changes for you and your entire experience, not just in business, but in life, but definitely in regards to how you're able to then begin to use those HSE strengths in support of really setting up your business so it works for you, and also really being able to feel the rewards of what being self-employed has to offer. But it really requires tapping into those strengths.
I love that. Could you give us an example of a shadow turned into a strength?
Absolutely. So I would say that the top HSE shadow that most of us experience and can relate to is that shadow of overwhelm. So, just even in the description that I gave in terms of what it means to be highly sensitive, probably, anyone who's listening right now can understand that if, as a person who's highly sensitive, we register stimulation and information at a much higher degree, how that would lead to overwhelm. And then you add being self employed on top of that. And there's a lot to manage when you're a person who's self employed. So the potential for overwhelm is staggering. Um, and when you're able to shift that shadow of overwhelm into a strength, where that really leads us is into the HSE strength of creativity. And as highly sensitives, we are extremely creative by nature. And this can really serve and support you in your business when you learn how to work with it. So, for example, you can use that strength of creativity in regards to how you approach your day, how you organize your day, how you prioritize your day, how you approach marketing, and even how you approach selling. And when you're really able to tap into that creative strength, suddenly everything about being self-employed that perhaps felt so imprisoning can really be this fabulous experience of truly enlightening. And it all just becomes truly easier and so much more fun.
I love that because really what I hear you saying is when you start to trust your creativity, you come up with your own ways to do the things that you need to do to be productive, to earn money, to find clients, to get things done. And it doesn't have to look like what you might be seeing everywhere else.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate that you really tuned in to two key aspects, and that is trust and allowing it to be and look differently. So, my work is called A Course in Business Miracles, and my mentoring programs are the Business Miracles mentoring programs. And where that comes from is my personal 30 plus years of being a student of A Course in Miracles,
Mm-hmm.
which is a psychological and spiritual curriculum and teaching. And when I first discovered that I was highly sensitive, I realized, oh my gosh, this means that I have to begin to approach everything differently. And I was immediately connected to the definition of a miracle versus A Course in Miracles, which is a shift in perception. And I realized that is absolutely what's needed for those of us who are highly sensitive to be successfully self employed. We must be willing to experience a shift in perception. We must be willing to first look at ourselves differently, that there's not something wrong with us, but instead there's something gifted about us. We must be willing to look at business differently, just what being in business means or what it's quote unquote supposed to look like. And we must be willing to approach every aspect about business differently: marketing, selling, operations. And that is everything that I went about creating for myself. And then again, the place with which the great body of work that I've created has come from. And the willingness for a shift in perception absolutely requires a deep aspect of trust. And the irony is that most of us who are highly sensitive have learned the exact opposite, which is to not trust ourselves, simply because for most of us, we've had experiences somewhere along the line of being shamed or criticized or ridiculed for being different. So we learned to keep that as much as possible away from others being able to find out about it, which leads us into what I refer to as the HSE coping mechanisms, that we've learned to cope rather than create. So there's a retraining that has to occur so that we can be able to access that trust and then therefore go about actually having that different experience that's so necessary and also so liberating as an HSE.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So I'm really interested to know, and you alluded to it, how you discovered or realized that you were highly sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel that that's something that maybe people don't actually realize.
Oh, for sure. I did not. So I've been self-employed for 15 years, and I had been in my business about 5 years, and I had brought my business across the $1 million mark for the first time. And it was a really pretty awful experience. I was absolutely massively overwhelmed. I was definitely overworked. I was overexhausted. And looking back, I can say that that moment in my business definitely had me in a dark night of the soul. I really pulled back from everything except continuing to pour love into the clients that I was serving at the time, because that moment really had me questioning, like, what was I doing and what is this all about? And I'm not so sure I want to be doing this if this is what's required, to create success as a person who's self-employed and in this industry of coaching. And it was through that dark night of the soul that I was connected with Dr. Erin. And when I first discovered the phrase highly sensitive and understood more about what it meant from her teaching and her work, it didn't surprise me so much that I was highly sensitive, although I had never heard that phrase before. But what did surprise me was how highly sensitive I was. I was off the charts highly sensitive. Um, And because I've always been a believer and a teacher that your ideal client is a version of you, I took one of Dr. Aaron's assessments into a group of 25 women entrepreneurs that I was working with in person at the time and had them all take the assessment. And of course, every single woman in that room was highly sensitive. Now, again, that didn't surprise me so much in terms of my own belief and teachings about ideal clients. But what did surprise me is that not one person in that room wanted to be highly sensitive. They really saw it as a detriment, as a weakness, and as a negative label. And that really began what is now the highly sensitive entrepreneur movement, because I realized in that moment something very important is happening here. We have a room filled with very talented coaches and healers and creative entrepreneurs. And if we're going to do this path of self-employment so that it's long term and we're really creating solid and sustainable success, we must go about it differently. And that was really the start.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's super cool. And you have a great quiz on your website for people who are curious about if they might be highly sensitive.
Yes.
And I took it before we got on the call, and my results, let's see, are super highly sensitive.
Well done.
Yeah. So and honestly, it didn't come as a surprise to me because I feel like I've known that about myself for a while. But what I find interesting about your story that you tell is that in a seemingly, high moment of success, of like what you would think would be success, you reach the $1 million point. That's where you had this dark night of the soul. And I wonder how many other people who are like killing it out there are wondering why they don't feel the way that they want to feel.
It's a really, really great point. And I would say that anyone who is having that experience, that is a moment to stop and to question, which is exactly what I did, because I had enough awareness and personal insight to recognize that that external success, that external mark, was quote unquote not enough. And that again, if this is what it was going to feel like, then I wasn't so much up for that. And because I have gone through the process that I've gone through, developed the teachings, tools that I have, I'm now still a 7-figure business owner with a very, very different experience. And that includes feeling so much more grounded, so much more at peace, and having a very different approach to how I actually engage with my business and what I create through my business. So it is very important to highlight that, crossing the $1 million mark isn't what caused me to be overwhelmed, overexhausted, overworked, but it was the way that I went about it. And I've learned how to create it so much more differently. And again, that's what I'm here to teach and share in my mentoring programs and with as many HSEs as possible, because we truly do have such important gifts to bring to the world at this time. And for those of us who are called to bring those gifts to the world through the path of self-employment, it is an awesome healing opportunity. And that's really what I always highlight for those that I mentor, that it truly is a calling. Because if you really just look at the facts, as a person who's highly sensitive, why in the world would you choose to be self-employed?
Oh my gosh, that was exactly what I was going to ask you next.
Right? It's just like, oh my gosh, like you are setting yourself up, right? To just bump up against, every barrier, or what I like to refer to as learning opportunity. But again, that's really where the ultimate healing lies. And that's what I see for all the HSEs that I mentor in my programs, is that there's an external success that is able to be created for sure. but the internal and personal transformation is so deeply profound. Literally, people are not the same person that they were when they walked into a Business Miracles mentoring program. You really, really come into your own sense of empowerment in terms of what it means to be highly sensitive on this planet at this time.
Mm-hmm. What was your transformation like? I mean, can you go back to that time and share sort of what you learned about you and, what you discovered about how you needed to be living?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So I had, mentioned what I now refer to as HSE coping mechanisms earlier, and I'll speak a little bit more about that. So I've identified three primary HSE coping mechanisms. There's the coping mechanism of pushing, the coping mechanism of hiding, and the coping mechanism of what I call combo plattering, where you flip flop back and forth between the two, pushing and hiding. And so I was definitely in the coping mechanism of pushing. And what that means is that, as I mentioned earlier, for those of us who are highly sensitive, somewhere along the line, we received the message that it's not okay to be the way that we are. So we learned how to literally cope within this world. That coping is supportive, but only to a degree, meaning it will get us through the bare minimum of an experience of basically surviving in this life, in this world. It will come at a high cost of keeping us from accessing our strengths. So for the pusher, what that means is that when you tend towards that coping mechanism, you will get done what I refer to as the other 80%, because there's 20% of us, right, who are born highly sensitive. So you will get done what the other 80% can get done, but it will come at a cost, and typically in the form of some type of personal and often health crisis and experience, because you will literally push yourself through. You will accomplish, but again, it will cost you immensely. Where someone who's not highly sensitive, they're accomplishing what you're accomplishing, and it's like they're taking a walk, in the woods for the day. It's fun, it's easy, it's natural to who they are. When you tend towards the coping mechanism of hiding, you are protecting yourself from even the possibility of being overwhelmed. So there's two HSE shadows that go primarily hand in hand with each coping mechanism. The coping mechanism of pushing, you will experience the HSE shadow of over responsibility to a deep degree, meaning that you feel very responsible for other people and their experiences, and you will go above and beyond to overcompensate for what they need, what they want, again at a detriment to yourself. The hider really connects with that HSE shadow of overprotection. So when that comes to being self-employed, for example, the hider will find anything and everything to do, but what is absolutely necessary to move the business forward. So for example, a hider will most likely have a gorgeous website. They'll have the best looking business card at a networking meeting. They have beautiful materials. They've probably designed thoroughly to the detail some incredible programs and offers. But when it comes to making the direct ask, having a selling conversation, really being proactive in their marketing, suddenly the laundry needs to be folded, the dog needs to be fed, sick parent needs to be taken care of, kids need to be brought to school, neighbor's yard needs to be raked, you name it. And they feel very busy, but at the end of the day, they don't really have the business to show for it. And so for myself, I am absolutely a recovering pusher. And that is how I brought my business across the $1 million mark for that first time, all from the coping mechanism of pushing. I was working at the time with a coach who was a mismatch for me, really because I didn't understand who I was as a highly sensitive. She was not highly sensitive. I was following everything that she was saying to do, and I did get the job done. But again, it came at a massive, massive cost. And as I referenced earlier, when you had asked about shadows and strengths, when you're able to learn about your coping mechanism, and then also what I refer to as the HSE coping cycle, and how to recognize and then shift yourself out of that cycle, that's when you then begin to have access to creating. And in order to really have that solid, sustainable financial success as a highly sensitive, we need to be in that space of creating versus coping. You'll just only get so far, which really isn't very far at all, when you're trying to operate from your coping mechanism.
That is such good stuff. And I mean, really, and I see it's interesting because I feel like when I think about myself, I think I might be a combo platter, because I go in cycles of push and hide. And I can really see it clearly. And it does feel like, oftentimes I'm protecting myself.
Yes.
And that really, really resonates with me. And I'm sure it does with, a lot of people that are listening. And I think too, it comes from a place of fear, right? It comes from this, like, as much as we say we want whatever it is we want, there's the fear that it's going to be too much, or there's a fear that you're not going to get it, or, so how do you incorporate some kind of practice to help you deal with that fear?
Yes. Well, the first part is really recognition, right? Or like I share in my teachings that awareness is the first step of transformation. So I appreciate that you spoke to fear, because the beginning of the coping cycle is that first we're triggered, right? There's something that triggers us. And then what happens very, very quickly is we go into a sense of fear, anxiety, and then lack of safety. And it's really the anxiety, even more of the fear, that has us go into the coping mechanism, right? As a way to attempt to manage that anxiety. I also teach a process that I call the Business Miracles Path from Resistance to Resilience. And in that teaching, I share about that cascading of emotions that, again, happens very, very quickly, which lands us in this place of, I won't be able to handle it. And that is very, very common for us highly sensitives. Now, again, why is that? Well, because we were trained to try to live in a world that was designed for the other 80%, right? Even as I was just speaking, I had this flash of elementary school and being in gym. And I can viscerally remember, gym class and some type of like exercise being introduced, like climb to the top of the rope or like dodge the ball. And these were things that were supposed to be fun, and they were massively anxiety producing for me as a kid who was highly sensitive, who didn't know that. And the experience that I had as I was standing there listening to, we're going to have to climb this rope in this short amount of time, is anxiety, and I'm not going to be able to do it. And how do I try to handle this? And of course, that's repeated over and over and over and over again throughout our lives. So as I spoke to earlier, there's a retraining practice that really has to occur. And that first step is awareness. So even if you can begin by just noticing, recognizing those moments when you're triggered, even if that cascading of emotions or that beginning of the cycle, you're not able to notice it until suddenly you're in the coping mechanism or you're in resistance, it's never too late to recognize. It's never too late to be aware. And then every time you do recognize or you do have a sense of awareness, to track it, to write it down, and literally begin to put pen to paper. So I don't mean just tracking it, in your head between you and you, but every energy management tool that I teach is all about a kinesthetic process, because it's really important that you have the experience of literally marking it by writing it down and then being able to go back and look at the trajectory. And when you start to track it, you'll start to see a pattern. And you'll start to see a pattern that is tangible to work with. And it's not just in your head where your, what I refer to as the ego mind, which comes from A Course in Miracles, which just means your fear-based mind, will interfere with the tracking and start to tell you stories like that there's something wrong with you, you'll never be able to do this, you don't have what it takes, you're too sensitive, or whatever tapes might be replaying from something that you heard early on or something that you've been telling yourself for years. So that physical, tangible tracking is so important. And I would say give yourself like at least 30 days of that tracking. It might need to be more, because when you first start, you might not be able to recognize. And then you can go back and you can look and you can start to see the pattern, and then you can start to take steps to shifting the pattern. But that recognition and that awareness is so, so imperative as a first step.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that tracking is so powerful. It's something that I
It
use
is.
on a very regular basis in
Yes.
my life. And it really, like you said, it helps you to see that it's not that there's something wrong with you. It just helps you to start to understand what you need
That's
and
right.
how to listen to what your heart is saying in a way
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yes.
So good. So Heather, we're coming up to the end of our time, but I really I want to touch into this idea of intuition and listening to your inner voice, because I feel that is a strength that highly sensitive entrepreneurs have, that highly
Yes.
sensitive people have.
Yes.
And I love talking about that, because this podcast is all about listening to your inner voice. And I would love for you to just talk to us a little bit about how intuition comes into play in your own life and as an HSE.
Absolutely. Well, intuition is one of our HSE strengths. We really do have access to that deep inner knowing, that inner voice, as you speak about. And again, most of us have lost touch with that, or we haven't yet developed the full trust, as we were talking about earlier, in that intuitive guidance. So, one of the ways that I teach intuition is how we can move from the shadow to the strength of intuition. So again, that recognition, that awareness is very valuable to be able to see what's happening when we're not connected to our intuition. And when we're not connected to our intuition, we really are very much in that shadow space, typically of over responsibility. When we're so concerned with taking care of others, in that space of people pleasing, which is another HSE shadow, wanting people to like us, not wanting to be quote unquote found out as being different, then we are in that space of, again, being over responsible. That can also kick us into being, what's referred to in a lot of psychological teachings as the rescuer. And then again, that sense of intuition is really working against us, because we're looking to save people rather than be able to use our intuition to guide us on how we're meant to support people. So if you can recognize when you're in over responsibility, when you are attempting to rescue, and then you can begin to shift out of that into more of what's referred to in the empowerment dynamic as coach mode. And that doesn't mean that your profession or your business has to be a coach as a coach, but just that you're there to be able to support others in accessing their own insights. And then that has you in a space of being able to more deeply and intimately connect with your intuition, because you're not so overloaded with the energy of attempting to be over responsible or to rescue.
Yeah.
And when you have access to that intuition, oh my gosh, everything opens up because it can really guide you and have you again accessing that creativity that we spoke about earlier. And, then just things get to be, again, more fun and you get to design them in a way that works for you. But you must be willing to trust the guidance you're receiving and then do it differently.
So beautiful. What is your inner voice saying to you these days?
My inner voice is saying to me these days, one, that personally I'm on the right path, and that two, I'm meant to bring a lot of other people with me. I really truly believe that it is our time as HSEs in this world. We're very much needed. The paradigm is open for us to be able to be of service and to really experience being compensated as a result of sharing that service from our strengths.
Excellent. Well, I am sold. I'm convinced. And Heather, I so appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom with us and, just reassuring us that there's nothing wrong with us. We're not messed up. We're exactly who we are supposed to be.
Exactly. Thank you so much. I've so enjoyed this conversation, Kelly.
Thank you again for being here today, for listening, for giving this time to yourself. It means so much to me that you are here with me, and I'm so grateful that you know that you deserve this. If you love this interview, you know what? I would so love it if you shared it with your friends on social media or not on social media. But if it is on Instagram or Facebook, be sure to tag me in at Kelly J. Covert. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you're learning and your takeaways, because that is like gold to me, you guys. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how much that means to me when I hear your feedback. And remember, if you are interested in checking out Heather's free seminar on January 9th, 2019, go ahead and check out the show notes for this at kellycovert.com/140, or right in the podcast app that you're listening to, there will be a live link. Always remember this, no matter what you accomplished last year or what you didn't accomplish, no matter what is on your goals list for 2019, maybe you haven't even figured it out yet. That's okay, because you are here for a reason. You are here for a purpose, and I believe so strongly in that I can say to you with full faith that you are doing exactly what you need to be doing in this moment if you are listening to your inner voice. Remember, you are worthy.